wrapped up in the things you are here to fulfill. Whatever you choose for a career path, remember the struggles along the way are only meant to shape you for your purpose.
Welcome to In Bloom. I am your host, Mikaela Richmond, and this is a Pro Humanity podcast. On today's episode, I have Cameron Sorsby. He is the CEO of Praxis, and he has a really interesting story. He went from being an intern to a CEO in, I believe, 5 months. Is that correct?
5 years.
Really fascinating story. Okay, so give us a little bit of a background on yourself. How did you get into this? How did you get into that first internship that set the stage for everything to Inspire?
Yeah, so basically I'll open with a more concise version of my personal story here. So growing up, I grew up in New Jersey, and I was the kid who I loved to play sports. I loved to read. I loved to learn, but the traditional school environment was just never my thing. I was always a kid who was just trying to figure out how could I do the minimal amount of schoolwork and keep people off my back, for my grades and everything. So wasn't at a very young age, I kind of knew about myself, didn't really buy into the value of school and classwork and everything. And not that I could articulate that completely at, 10 or 13 and, through high school and everything. But I kind of innately knew, there was something that just seemed off to me of why do we have to go to the same 8 classes every day and then have, 3 hours of homework every night, et cetera. I'd much rather just be able to, have more freedom in what I got to learn and study and explore and whatnot. So I was a kid growing up, super competitive, loved to play sports, really achieved a lot through sports, for a young person, really loved to build relationships with my teammates, my coaches. I was typically captain of my team and whatnot. And school was kind of just always this thing that was a thorn in my side. And then, later on in high school, I always planned to, go to college because 1, that's what everybody does. But 2, I was going to go to college to keep playing soccer essentially. And I had injuries towards the later years in high school and just kind of got burnt out from it. And, once I kind of realized all right, I'm not going to be a Division I athlete. I'm not really as motivated to keep playing sports and everything. So I was coming up in my senior year, just kind of felt like I didn't have any direction. I ended up applying to 16, 17 different colleges. And, I just picked one to go to, mostly just to, move out of the state that I grew up in and have a different experience and everything. So essentially quickly found out in college that, college is more of the same as high school. Every year I felt like I struggled with, arguing with myself if I should drop out or not. But, back then this was, early 2010s. There weren't clear alternatives to college. I very much grew up my high school graduating class, 99% of kids, you go to college. That's what you do. If you don't go to college, there must be something wrong with you. So I had a lot of the typical social and familial pressure to stay in school. And at the same time, I was starting to feel that those bigger existential stresses over what am I going to do with my life. And that there was a turning point for me about halfway through my college years where I finally just woke up one day after talking to my dad about this, and a light bulb went off and be all right, I'm going to stop considering and feeling bad about if I should stay in school or not. I'm just going to do it, but I'm going to do it in the, most bare minimum way possible as far as my academic, performance. And what I really want to focus on is what are all the things that I can do outside of school to help me figure out what I want to do professionally, career-wise, to build relationships with, interesting people that I kind of looked up to, and I could see myself, following in their footsteps in some way, and to actually, start learning about what I want to do through experience rather than, feeling like, all right, I'm just taking these college classes in order to get out of here, and then I'll start that process. I knew I didn't want to wait to start this process of helping, myself figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to start that now. And I very much saw school as, a distraction to that, essentially. So essentially, once I started putting kind of experience first, I just went through a series of experiments for myself. I was interested in political philosophy and current events from a really early age, and I kind of rediscovered that interest in college. So I ended up, I stopped the approach of like, hey, I'm just going to keep reading about this stuff on my own. And I volunteered for a political campaign for about a month over Christmas break and stuff. And I learned a lot from that experience about, both what I did enjoy about it, but mostly what I didn't enjoy about it, and maybe realize like, okay, like, don't want to pursue politics as a career. But I got to be around, other people my age that were, actually into the ideas and more philosophical. And I remember really enjoying staying up till 2, 3 a.m. in the evenings, talking and arguing with, friends and stuff. And I really enjoyed like that level of engagement. It was like, this is the first time, having this kind of like more intellectual engagement, because I never really got it from school. So that made me more focus on, kind of pursuing education. But I also knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't like the school environment. So I was like, how to figure out what opportunities are out there. And long story short, I ended up working for a nonprofit organization called Foundation for Economic Education, my, first year and a half, 2 years out of school. And at the same time, I had met this guy, Isaac Morehouse. I interned with him my senior year of college. He was working for a similar organization as FEE. And at the same time, he was coming up with this idea for, this new college alternative apprenticeship program called Praxis. And the first time he told me about it, I immediately knew this was something I wanted to be a part of, somehow, some way. I was just really excited about the idea for Praxis, wanted it to exist because it really personally resonated with me. And that was my first, kind of interaction with Praxis as a business. And, kind of stayed in touch with Isaac as he was just getting things off the ground. Like it was barely a business at that point. It was just him. He got the website up, the summer after I graduated. And, he was focused on recruiting the first participants to the program. I did things here and there to help out. And then, a few months down the road, we talked, and I asked him like, hey, what's the most valuable thing I could do for Praxis right now? And he told me like, hey, become a customer. That's what we need more than anything, is those kind of initial participants to go through the program, prove out the model of the program and be successful. And we can, be able to tell their stories. So I jumped on that opportunity for two reasons. One, I did kind of have just that approach of like, I wanted to be valuable to this business that I wanted to be a part of long-term. But secondly, like I saw Praxis as a program experience. That was something I was really excited about. I kind of treated it as a more entrepreneurial approach to an MBA, as a recent college grad. Like, yes, I had a really good first job that I was excited about, but I already knew that wasn't what I wanted to do long-term. So I use Praxis, just like our participants today use Praxis as like, to help me figure out what I want to do long-term in my career to build, really valuable, like foundational professional skills and habits and mindsets and stuff.
I love that. Okay. So whenever you get into Praxis, whenever you got into Praxis, you already had this idea that something was wrong with education. And I think that a lot of people intuit that something's wrong with education, but everybody has different ideas of how you solve it. And I think that has to do with the fact that other than broadly, we haven't completely specified what those problems are. In your opinion, what are the problems? Like, what are the main issues?
With so education is obviously a big space. We'll start with talking about college and in that area. So, I mean, I think the biggest problem is at this point, college is something that everyone is expected to go through and attend, and no questions asked, it will be valuable for you. So, so socially, like if you have something where like every single 17, 18-year-old, as they're graduating high school, there's no decision process in what you're going to do next. College is just like the next step. So I think that's a huge issue. There's no critical thinking involved in the decision of like whether you're going to college or not. So think about it, if you have a product and everyone just assumes like this product is going to be really valuable for them, that's not going to be the case. But if we're kind of just like determined to like force everyone to be like, yes, buy this product, it is valuable. If you don't buy this product, there's something wrong with you. That's essentially how every 17, 18-year-old feels. And that's what they've been, told to think for pretty much their entire lives. And you have, different incentive structures in place where, college becomes, it's not an even playing field essentially. So, student loans are guaranteed by the federal government. That's why, college tuition just consistently increases in price and cost. So over time, like the quality, you don't have to have, there's not enough incentive for colleges to be valuable to their customers. They don't even treat their students as if they are customers in the first place. But over time, if you have those kind of messed up incentives, and over time, the quality is going to decrease. So it's another thing I would point to. But the actual experience of college, I would say it was never designed to do what people kind of say it does now, which is to help young people get their career started. It was meant to be more like a very traditional, research-based academic environment, but it's turned into, the one and only way you're supposed to start your career. So it's not even doing what it was designed to do originally. And it's essentially just been treated as, one size fits all thing. So, and you see that with Praxis, like we're not trying to be the college alternative for everybody. We're trying to be the college alternative for a certain type of young person with certain, shared values and ambition and broad career interests. Like I think everybody in Praxis is starting from the perspective of like, hey, like I want to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial, more business focused. I don't know exactly what I want to do. So I'm coming to this program to help me figure it out. And then, I want to get my career started now, as opposed to, kind of going through this 4 to 5 year extended process before I get that first job. So the direct approach of Praxis, that's something else that kind of, separates it and makes it different from other programs and stuff.
Yeah. One interesting thing that you said was the concept of students as consumers, and how in a business setting, both whenever you consume something, like if I buy my phone, it's valuable to me. I want to treat it well. And on the other side, Apple wants to treat me well as a consumer, because otherwise I won't come back. And you see this interesting interplay where like in school, it's so taken for granted. It's become so obvious. It's like brushing your teeth. It's like, of course I do that. Which is interesting. And it's also interesting because unless you actually implant that concept of school as a consumable, like you almost can't respect it in the way that it needs to be respected. You can't utilize it in the way that it needs to be utilized. Like there are so many ways that I remember going throughout school and not even learning anything, but like caring so much about that A, or caring so much about different things that logistically don't matter in the scope of where I get or who I become in my life, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different aspects of the schooled approach to education that just don't translate well to real world experience.
Mm-hmm.
What makes somebody successful once they've started their career out in the real world per se are not the things that necessarily make them successful in a school environment. So
let's talk about this. Why? Like why is it that, so I think it's almost like antiquated. Like it's that this school, it takes 10 years for these books to be published and for this information to get into the school system. And then at that point, it's like 10 years passed and you're like scrambling to find it. So then it's like a trickle down effect, right? It's like the people that get it right whenever it happens are at the top, and the people that don't get it until it gets to the bottom are at the bottom, just because like knowledge is necessary. I don't know. That's a thought in my mind. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just playing an entirely different game. So
Okay.
if you're an entry level employee at a startup or a growing business of some kind, you're trying to figure out like how can I provide value to business owners, to
Mm-hmm.
the company at large, to our customers, take care of them, bring in new ones, etc. Like the outcomes, the goals there are very outcome based.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, like, yes, there is a sense of like you have to be able to be a good employee includes working well with other people, having like basic intelligence, basic communication skills, but that's not enough. You have to kind of learn things on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have really good social skills, personal judgment. You have to figure out like, okay, hey, if there's an issue that comes up with a customer and you're in a customer success position, like you're responsible for making sure that customer has a good experience with the company, with your brand, with your product. Mm-hmm. That's a totally different thing than being in a classroom and you're given an assignment from a teacher and you're being graded on, some kind of scale of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very hard to align those two things. And, just that, I think that's like the basic gist of like the academic school environment is so far removed from, what are the skills you need to be successful professionally. So you're just playing two entire different games, and you're playing the school game for the first 18 to 22, 23 years of your life. That's not going to prepare you for, what you need to be able to do as an adult.
Interesting. So like you could break this up into two segments, potentially. Tell me if I get this wrong. So you can break it up into two segments. It's like the idea of being a good XYZ employee, person, etc. Then there's this other side where it's like, okay, not only do you have to be a good XYZ, you also have to be good at XYZ. So it's like having that skill set, that knowledge, that expertise. So do you think to some degree, there are ways that we have been focusing too much on being a good employee, student, customer, etc., and not so much on the skill set? Because like if we go back to that thought process of like a lot of the books that you use in school are pretty old, actually. Like I was looking at some of my old textbooks and they're like 10 years old. I'm like, wow, this is interesting. So it's not new information. So then it's possible that the skills are a little bit outdated. And then if you look at the side of the being a good It honestly all boils down to being a good person. Like it's not about being a good employee. It's not about being a good friend. It's like at the very base level, it's all about being a good person. Um, can an institution even do that though?
Make you a good person?
Help you to become, maybe.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the context of everything, but I mean, just think about it. Like, what do you think the goal of school is? Like, what's the goal of K through
Good
12? Like,
question.
what would you say the charitable interpretation of school is? What are they trying to do?
I think it's mostly foundational. Like what do you need to know to then build upon? What are the main things? And we've boiled it down to, math, arithmetic, and you have language, so you have English and grammar, and then you have all of these different science. You have these different frameworks that they think are they. I don't know who the they is. I guess like a government or whoever has instituted the plan. Um, they say is necessary for you to be intelligent.
So there's like, I think the common person looking at school is like, the goal of school is to help kids develop enough so that they're capable of leading good lives. Like, I think that would be a
Okay,
very
I like that.
charitable interpretation. So yeah, like, I think the answer is yes. Can there be something that helps kids develop into like well-rounded young adults that are capable of leading, fulfilling lives, successful lives, like from the bare minimum of I can take care of myself, I can support myself, etc., to up Maslow's hierarchy of needs of like I can lead a good life where I find fulfillment in my work and my life and my family, my relationships, etc. Yeah, like I think a larger institution can play a big part of that, but I don't think it can solve it on its own. I also think the belief that essentially like the public school system in the US, let's just call that one single institution for argument's sake. I don't think a single institution is capable of carrying out that mission for every 5 to 18-year-old in a country as large as the US and stuff. So you're going to need different options for different kinds of people.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that we start with of like what's wrong with the school system. And then I do think there's like I fundamentally disagree with the schooled approach of education that, hey, the best way to set kids up for success, as adults is, roughly them, spending 8 hours in a school environment. They're going from class to class, studying these very formal, like more academic topics, and we're going to, measure their performance in this specific way. And as long as they just like follow the rules and follow the roadmap in front of them, then they're going to do well, as young adults and stuff. I think overall that's a super outdated model, especially given the world that we live in today. And just to bring it back to Praxis a little bit, like I think a lot of what we do in Praxis really comes down to breaking out of those like habits that people form in a more traditional school environment, and for them to take more control over what they're learning, what kinds of career paths they want to pursue, and kind of like breaking out of that like permission mindset that's developed and stuff. So I think if we're talking about K through 12 school, the more you can build an environment where kids have more control and more agency over what they get to do as they're developing and growing, the better they'll be set up to be able to just navigate like adult life essentially.
Okay, so the way that you've painted this in my mind is that, so the purpose of school is to live well. Like if you boil it all the way down, the purpose of the institution, school, or honestly, most institutions, but we'll talk about school, is to live well, like to get to a point where you can provide what you need, have enough, whatever. So if you boil that down even further, then the purpose is to give value. And then if you boil that down even further, then the purpose is to give value deemed valuable by the society that we live in. So then I guess the idea is that the structure of education currently is creating, if I follow that map that I've painted in my mind, if I follow that map, then it's like the purpose of the education system right now is to create individuals capable of giving value that we deem valuable whenever we created that model. Thoughts? It's kind of like sporadic in my brain, but like
no, it's okay. I'm just trying to follow. I think
I can boil it down a little bit more, try to be a little bit more concise.
Yeah, sure. Go for
it. Okay. So if we zoom all the way out, institutions don't start or build themselves because of any other reason than somebody decided that this was valuable, like it needed to be built, right? And so at the very heart of school, the idea is to live well. Like we want to give as many children the opportunity to get to a place where they can have a good life, whatever good life means. Mm-hmm. So then if you go in a little bit, it's like, okay, well, how do you live well? The way that you live well is if you can provide value to somebody and get something in return, right? Or like, that's kind of how society is working right now. Yes or no?
Yeah, so I think this is the question, like, what does it mean to live a good life and stuff? But I think you give a lot of basic definitions that most people would agree on. I think with people who kind of like are more pro traditional schooling versus, the people that are kind of like, hey, I think there's a lot of, things wrong with, the typical schooling system and everything. It comes down to, I think one is people that are pro schooling, whether they admit it or not, they're more in favor of getting young people to conform into like society as it exists today. And like there's, certain standards of, there's certain criteria that everybody needs to be able to meet in order to, just be like at the basic level of, self-sufficient adulthood, be a valuable member of a community and stuff. And I think the other side would say, like, we should, lean more towards focusing on what is best for the individual. And what's best for the individual might be a little bit different for everybody. But the goal is to like serve the individual well rather than, this one size fits all kind of approach and stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Even in the framework, sometimes my mind makes a lot of interesting connections that I'm not very good at condensing quickly. So thank you for the clarification.
Working through it.
Okay, so in your opinion, I guess if we go into this idea of an institution and what it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to help the individual, how does Praxis particularly take this idea of an institution or like a framework? Like Praxis is like a framework. It's like this idea of
there's a specific structure to the program in our approach that's the same for everybody.
Yeah. And it does it in an entirely different way that gives more agency to the individual, which is interesting. what does Praxis value that makes it so? And also, are there downsides to it?
Yeah, so I would say what is at the core of Praxis is that the best way to learn how to thrive and be successful out in the real world is to get out in the real world as quick as possible. So everything that we're doing in the program is one, either trying to like just get you started in your career as quick as we can, and then two, like along the way give you, tools and skills and frameworks that you can use to not just like, hey, I can learn a skill that is valuable in an entry level position, but ideally I can learn it in a way that teaches me how to learn, anything else I'm interested in learning. And now I have something that I can use in the long term rather than just going through, a training program that's, focus on one specific kind of job, one specific kind of skill area, but it's not going to necessarily transfer to other things that you want to, learn and grow in. But essentially it's experience focused rather than treating education and experience as two separate things. We try to, meld those two together.
Mm-hmm. And so the idea of experience, so going back to your original, you were talking about your story, like, it was interesting because you don't actually have to wait to go and find that experience, that applicable experience. So like how would you recommend to people that even regardless of what situation that they're in, they find those experiential opportunities for themselves?
Yeah, I think so. Specific to starting your career, and not just like starting your career where it's like, okay, I get a job, but if you have a goal of, I want to build a career that I find meaningful, fulfilling, and, and I can be successful in on more traditional, like financially, etc. Over the first, I'm 20 years old. I want to feel good about where I'm at 25. I think, and you lack, you have zero to minimal work experience, professional experience at all, but you have some, you have some good things going for you. You're able to work hard. You have, basic intelligence. You're, strong communicator, etc. I think just take it one step at a time. Like, where could you go spend 6 months to a year, in a professional environment and be better off for it than you are today? And how do you open up that first opportunity for yourself? And then, once you're going to reach a certain point where you feel like, you're plateauing in that same environment because you've gotten all the value you can out of it. And now you just have to repeat that process. And if you repeat that process long enough, you're going to essentially have that compounding effect, like within your personal career and everything. So I think the big myth is that people have been told like you need to go through the college experience and everything that comes with it for 4 to 5 years in order to access that first, like more valuable long, career opportunity that has some upside that you can keep building. And, we're essentially very simply saying that's not the case. You can access those initial opportunities in a much faster way while also preparing yourself to, be equipped to build a career, in a more valuable way where you're not just like dependent on, what formal education credentials you have. You're more, adaptable to, hey, if you discover you have an interest in cryptocurrency, you don't feel like you have to go to cryptocurrency school to access those opportunities. You know how to build valuable skills, you know how to build relationships, you know how you get your foot in the door in opportunities that are interesting to you. And from there, you can be off to the races.
Yeah, no, I like this idea of like allowing other things to be your credential, like not taking. So one of the things that you and Mitchell say a lot is that many of the times people will put things out there like you need this sort of certification, you need XYZ, because they don't know how else to measure it. And if you can give another way that they can measure it, most of the time that's good enough.
Yeah, I think people have been trained to, like, they want to find the grading system so that they can just like know where they stand and where they rank among their peers and stuff. And I would say like that mindset is just very limiting, and it's only going to get you so far. It's not that it's entirely unuseful, but it's just not the best way to think about like, how do I build a valuable career for myself, and how do I access opportunities that I will be better off for and everything. And that's where I think like, instead of thinking about, what credentials do I need to collect that will make other people, feel like that will impress other people, you should think about like, okay, what combination of, tangible skills, knowledge, softer skills do I need in order to, access opportunities where I can keep learning and growing and create value for, the people that I'm working with and for, as well as myself.
No, I like that. Okay, so I have an idea that I would like to see what you think about. So what do you think about me throwing out a ton of misconceptions and then just seeing what you have to say about them, and then like kind of going a little bit deeper into them, picking your brain on a lot of these misconceptions and really, really going into them?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I guess first we can start with the question of not getting a job because of a lack of credential. Like that's one of the biggest ones. Just like, how do I get these opportunities? I don't know if there are going to be opportunities. Everything says I need a college degree, etc.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, like it's understandable why most young people, that's kind of that's the default assumption, is that like, I need to have certain credentials, certain certifications in order to access these like adult career oriented jobs. And I think that comes like, the obvious place is like, that's what they've been told their whole life through school. That's what school is essentially telling them. But I think more importantly, it's a question of like not knowing what you don't know. So like, early on, you don't understand like, you don't have enough context to be like, okay, here are the skills. Here's how I can, what would be valuable for me to bring into this business in order to make me qualified for this role, given my lack of experience that I have up to this point. So the question you want to be able to answer is, what would I be able to show a hiring manager, a decision maker, that would make it clear that I can be valuable, to their business? That's the starting point. The starting point isn't, what formal credentials do I need? It's how can I convince somebody to, exchange value for value with me? How can I convince somebody to pay me for, the work that I can produce for them? So you need to, have context as like, what would actually be valuable given the opportunity you're interested in, and what would be the best way for you to, develop the basic skills that you would need for that role. A lot of the times, like if you're starting in, customer success and sales, inside a, a software startup, you don't need a lot in order to, be actually able to do the job. You need to have strong communication skills. You need to be a critical thinker. You need to understand what the company is selling and who they're selling to. And then it's about answering the question of like, what's the best way for me to prove that I have those things? And there's a lot you can do to get creative with, proving yourself that you can be valuable to a company that has nothing to do with, more schoolwork, more formal credentials.
What about the fact that sometimes credentials are like that checkbox, like they'll put you through a filtering system and that is one of the okay, you're out of the mix.
Yeah. So the common issue of, well, I have to eventually apply to this job. They're asking for a resume. They're asking, they have strong preference for, a 4-year degree on their job posting. If I don't have those credentials on my resume, I'm not even going to get, an interview or something. So this is where you can get super creative. But it starts with knowing, like, at the end of the day, what a business cares about is finding talent that can, create more value for the business than they take from the business in terms of, their pay and salary and stuff. So that's what a business cares about. There's these companies, these entrepreneurs aren't out there being like, I have a, what I care about more than anything is if every employee at my company has a college degree, so I can, be able to say that. They're looking for people that can be valuable to their business. So there's an opportunity because pretty much every candidate that's applying to the jobs that you're trying to land, they're all doing the same thing. They're all submitting a resume. They all have, roughly the same kinds of credentials. They are not standing out from the crowd. If you can find a way to stand out from the crowd, and I would recommend, putting together like tailored projects that are relevant to the company for the role that you're hiring, that you're targeting. That is the easiest way to stand out from every other candidate that's simply following, the directions on the job application and stuff. That's very basic without going into a lot of detail there. That's just true. Like, there's plenty of ways to stand out and get creative with essentially like bypassing the initial process. But it starts with the first principle of a company is looking for people that can be valuable to them. What is the easiest way, most efficient way for you to prove to a company that you can, you bring more value to the table than other candidates, as opposed to not like, I think thinking in terms of, well, they're asking for, a resume and they have degree preferences on it. If that's what you're focused on, you're not focused on the actual principles of, what does this company need in this role?
So what about starting salary? Like, a lot of people like the fact that whenever they get out of college, they have a pretty good base pay.
I think for a lot of college graduates, if you ask them, they aren't happy with their pay. I think I forget the late, there's a bunch of statistics out there that you can look at of how like underemployed, recent college graduates since 2020 are, et cetera. But you also, as a college graduate, you're also dealing with more, student debt. So your urgency to be bringing in, higher salary sooner to make your debt payments is much greater than someone who's skipped college and, just has less of a personal burden to put up with early on in your career. But the simple thing is, like, it's a low bar to get to that entry level salary number where most recent college graduates are at. I think if needed, like, you can look at salary in terms of, okay, like it's possible it's an opportunity for you to, essentially, offer your services for cheaper until you can really prove that you're valuable to a business. That I think it's less about, hey, if I'm willing to work for, 30,000 a year instead of 40,000 a year, which they're willing to pay somebody, I'm going to be more valuable to this company because I'm saving them 10,000. It's not about that. Because in the long run, you want to be providing more value to a company so you can demand, higher pay for yourself. But what's valuable about an approach like that, and I think it can work better in smaller companies, typically startup environments, because you're essentially signaling to employers that you are willing to bet on yourself. You are not only looking for, a 9-to-5 stable paycheck. You're looking to come in and, have an environment where you can learn and grow as an individual. I think one of the strongest signals that you could send someone to communicate that is like, hey, I'm willing to come in, spend, put me on a trial period for 1 to 3 months. I'll take lesser pay for it because I have the understanding that I don't have, a lot of experience. I don't have a long track record of, professional performance that gives you confidence that I'm going to be able to do the job. I'm asking for the opportunity to prove myself. And that's one of probably like, that's a great sign you have the character traits that, I would want to hire for. If you have that kind of like level of hustle and determination where you're willing to, put more skin in the game by taking lesser pay. Now, obviously, like that's not a long-term strategy, but it can be, like I've seen a lot of people like implement that strategy and, to land opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't be able to, whether it's, for full-time employment or freelance opportunities with clients and stuff.
No, that makes sense. Okay, and then the last misconception before I hit you with some rapid fire questions. Networking. People love the idea of networking in college and networking, either getting involved in clubs, groups, meeting a lot of people, donors, alum, etc. What are your thoughts on networking?
Yeah, so I think most people take too much of a like stuffy approach to like what good networking is. They probably think about it as like, oh, I have to go to these conferences where important people are and then hand out a business card and somehow that's going to lead to good things. I think networking is really valuable. We just think about it in a more like stuffy and fluffy way. When I think about what does good networking look like, I think it means like you're able to build, genuine relationships with people over time that create, win-win situations. So, for young people, building relations, like when you're thinking about like, hey, like a lot of young people that we work with, they're looking for mentorship. And most people think of mentorship as like, oh, I have to go ask this person to be a formal mentor of mine. And somehow like they'll magically agree to like just give me their time because they like working with young people or something. Better way to approach that would be how do I figure out how to, bring value to the table so that this person's willing to give me opportunities to essentially work alongside them. That's what you're going for. And those are the more valuable like forms of mentorship over like formal like mentor-mentee relationships and stuff. I also think big misconception about networking when it comes to like college students is, magically college provides a really valuable network because of the your peers that you went to school with, now that you've spent 4 to 5 years with them, like, long term, that's a valuable network somehow. You want a vertical network. So you want like-minded peers that you can learn alongside of, and then have like a certain level of drive and work ethic and curiosity. So you're not just like in an isolated environment where you feel like you have to figure everything else out on your own. Like, it's nice to have peers that are, trying to, do the same things that you're trying to do, and, in the same life stage. But you also want a network of, people that are 2 to 3 steps ahead of you in your career, so they can relate more to where you are, and they can probably give better advice than people that, were in your shoes not 2 to 3 years ago, but 20 to 30 years ago. And then you also want to be able to connect with, people that have greater experience, that have, possible opportunities for you to, go work for them, go learn from them, etc. So I think it really starts with, don't think of networking as this like big sales process that you're trying to run, is like, I need to collect, mentors and business cards and everything. It first starts with, be interested in other people and be an interesting person yourself, and try to, over time, just build genuine relationships, and good things will happen from there.
I love that. Brief touch on this one, because this one's a big one. The college experience. It's sold as like this big thing, and I think the first thing whenever I said that I wasn't going to go to college, or wasn't going to continue, probably, was that everybody was like, well, you're missing out on the experience, like, what are you going to do about that? And I was like, I don't really care, but like, yeah, a lot of people care about it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it comes back to this like one size fits all problem of the college experience. Like, everybody knows what you mean when you say that. It's like, oh, you're going to spend 4 years, and, you're going to gain a certain level of independence, but you're going to be on this, you're going to be on campus in this academic environment. You're also going to have a bunch of parties to go to. And, the college life is nothing like the rest, nothing like you'll ever experience afterwards and everything. It's like, just essentially people are saying is like, that experience is valuable for everyone, no matter what their preferences, interests, values are. Which, most things out of college, like, if people said that about everybody needs to go work at a startup, or everybody needs to start a podcast, or, everybody needs to, travel abroad, or whatever it is, like, most people are able to see like, well, not every kind of experience is going to be valuable for every kind of person. But the college one is particularly frustrating, because I think the perception of it is pretty drastically different than what happens in reality. Like, I went to college. I would say I had the typical college experience of, I went through a big party phase. I had the typical college experience, and I'm just telling you, like, it wasn't all that it's cracked up to be. And I think it's just wrong to essentially like encourage young people to be like, this is an experience that everybody should have. You should think about it for yourself of what's valuable for you. If, I think there are some people that can be well served by having, an extended period of time where, they kind of let loose and do their own thing, and, they loosen up, they go to parties, they live like a little bit irresponsibly. There's a lot more interesting, better ways to have that kind of experience than signing up for, 4 to 5 years of school and the tuition that comes with it and everything. If you really crave the college experience, go move to a college town, find a room to rent with other college students. And I'm telling you, like, you can have the college experience for free if that's what you really want. But I think what's more important is just I think it's just wrong to set young people up for, it's like, oh, this one thing is something that everyone should want for themselves. I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to be like, you know what, I'm just going to skip out on this. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It probably means like you value your time more than most people, your age and everything, if that's what you're going through and stuff. But I think it's overrated. But I also think like if there's aspects of it that you really value, there's plenty of ways to get it without the commitment of actually going to college.
I like that. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good point. All right, let's hit you with those rapid fire. So my first question, what is a good life?
So for me, it's professionally, I do interesting work that's always challenging me to grow and get better. For personally, what I value more than anything is like having a smaller group of relationships with family and friends that I really value, and then being in a position to invest in those relationships. That's the simplest way to think about it. If I'm doing work that's challenging and fulfilling, and I have, a handful of important relationships with people that are like-minded, that share my values, and I have the time and resources to invest in those relationships, then I would say I'm living a good life.
I like that. Okay, what do you value?
What do I value? I value my own time more than anything. In people, I value, I think people are different, but I really value sense of humor. Like if you're not able to, take like kind of live life lightheartedly, then I think you're kind of missing out on what life is about. So that's something that always sticks out to me early on when I meet new people, is like, does this person, have a sense of humor? Can they laugh at themselves? Do they take themselves too seriously? Those can be both, green flags, red flags on each side.
I like that. What lights your spirit up?
Seeing Praxis participants and grads succeed on their own terms and build confidence through the program.
I like that. And last, if you could give only one piece of advice or one little tidbit of wisdom to generations below you, what would it be?
Think for yourself, and to take perceived risks early on in your career and life, because there was a tweet I saw a couple of weeks ago that actually articulated my belief on this really well, is that not taking any risks is riskier than taking a bunch of smaller risks and stuff. So I think school teaches us to essentially be more conservative with our decision making and playing it safe, and always playing it safe will end up being the riskier option than being more adventurous, especially early on in life.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cameron. It has been a pleasure. I love talking to you about your thoughts on school, and I know that you've learned a lot and done a lot of really cool things, and have actually changed my life with Praxis. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me on. I had a blast.
Yeah, of course. I hope that you found this episode enriching. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you would like to write a rating or a review, that would be fantastic. You can also follow me at uneducated podcast. I'm looking forward to our next episode. Cheers.